Another day in the chess world and another scandal. The latest online rapid play event in the Champions Chess Tour series is taking place, and yesterday's game between Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen was hotly anticipated by the chess world. Of course, after the big scandal in St. Louis with Carlsen withdrawing from the tournament, having been beaten by Niemann, then this game was always going to be of enormous interest. So this isn't over the board, this is rapid play, and they're playing in different locations around the world. But anyway, here's what happened. This is round 6 game. So Niemann opened with d4. Carlsen played knight f6. And Niemann responded with c4, and after that shocking development, Carlsen resigned the game and switched off his camera. And that was that. So Niemann picked up the 3 points. Well, extraordinary stuff. So basically, Carlsen doubled down in his protest against Hans Niemann without offering any evidence and any explanation. And afterwards, Carlsen's father said that Magnus wouldn't be giving any interviews during the tournament. This kind of passive-aggressive protest I consider unsportsmanlike behaviour from Carlsen. Just imagine what this is doing to Hans Niemann's confidence. And Carlsen's actions don't just have an influence on Niemann, but also on the tournament standings, and it's a distraction for the other competitors too. Earlier in the tournament, the director of the Champions Chess Tour events, Arne Horvej, of course a Play Magnus employee, offered a lukewarm explanation of why Hans Niemann was playing in the event. He said, "That's plain and easy, due to the tour regulations. In the regulations, it says that if you're amongst the top 8 players from the last tournament, you're automatically invited to the next tournament. In Miami, we had 8 players there and Hans participated, so he was automatically sent an invite to this event. That invite was sent well before the tournament in St. Louis, so it means that we sent that invite to him. After the commotion, which of course we've been following closely, we saw that there's been no indication of Hans Niemann being involved in any sort of cheating in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. So there was no reason for us whatsoever, based on allegations back and forth, to revoke his invitation. So that invitation stood, and he's participating in this tournament." And I find that quite pointed, actually. Horvej mentioned that they found no evidence of cheating in the Champions Chess Tour events, but he didn't mention St. Louis. And so basically he was saying, well, Niemann was invited because of the regulations. It's not that they were delighted to have him play, although I'm sure they're glad of the publicity. But I wonder, would Carlsen's unsportsmanlike behaviour, that's what I believe it is, would that behaviour be tolerated by any other tournament? Carlsen would surely be sanctioned after this protest. And this is the problem. The Play Magnus organisation is running the event, and there will always be a conflict of interest. So what happened after Carlsen's protest to resignation? Well, he won his next game beautifully against Aronian. Niemann drew against Adiban and then lost to Lei. And now I'm going to show you Carlsen's last game of the day against Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. And this was a fantastic game, actually. So let me just find that game. Here we go. So Praggnanandhaa with white, Carlsen with black, opened e4. And Carlsen is playing this modern defence, which he's also done earlier in the tournament, actually. And it's risky. You basically give white a lot of control in the centre, but you're hoping to strike back later. Pragg came to the board very well prepared. He played h4. Now, the most common moves here are either a4 to prevent black's expansion or queen d2. h4 has been seen before, and it's a dangerous move. In fact, Carlsen himself has played this. If that pawn is blocked, then that gives away the g5 square. So white can play knight f3 and put the knight on g5, and black never wants to play the pawn to f6 because that blocks in the bishop and weakens that g6 square. So probably not advisable to block it. So Carlsen played knight f6. And the most popular move here has been f3 with the idea of g4 sometimes. But Pragg just went straight ahead with h5. And after this was taken, he sacked the exchange. No hesitation. And what's interesting is if you plug this into computer, well, the latest version of Stockfish rather approves of this sacrifice. That's very interesting. So this is prepared. And in fact, looking back at there have been a few games played with this. And there was a compatriot of Pragg's, Siriseka Ganguly, who had also played this sacrifice in an online game. And well, here he played castle's queenside and won beautifully. I'm just going to show you just a few moves of that. He just stormed through the middle of the board and absolutely blew his opponent away. So yeah, this is going to be trending, this exchange sacrifice. So what has white got for the exchange? Well, the queen is in a fantastic position, can't be pushed away very easily. White controls the center. There could be follow-up moves like knight f3 and knight g5. Well, instead of castles here, which I think is a good move, Pragg actually played e5. And again, clearly prepared. He wants to put his knight in on e4, play bishop g5. And this is incredibly dangerous. And you have to ask, well, how is black's king getting out of danger? Clearly won't be going to the king side. But look at all these pieces in the way. If the king wants to evacuate to the queen side, it's going to take a very long time. In the meantime, black is attacking very swiftly with these moves. Carlsen therefore played d5 to prevent the knight coming into e4. So we have basically a French kind of pawn structure here, but with white's queen already in a fantastic position. Carlsen's queenside, and now c5. Carlsen desperately needs counterplay. Pawn takes pawn, bishop d7. He also needs to develop quickly. And here Pragg played f4, looks reasonable. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't just play knight f3 and play with pieces. I think there's a strong argument for playing with knight f3 and just getting on with the attack. But f4 also looks pretty good. Knight f3 now. So, I mean, by playing f4, of course, Pragg has secured the pawn on e5. Queen a5. So Carlsen getting ready to try to castle queenside. And here Pragg just went for it with knight g5. I think the chickens among us would have played knight d4 to securely block that pawn on d5. But knight g5, really dangerous. And here the black king just has to get out of trouble. If black tries to sort of hang, keep things solid, then queen h7 hits the bishop, and then knight takes pawn. I mean, this is so dangerous. So Carlsen castled queenside. Pragg took on f7 and now d4. And I think this is really the only chance for black, is to complicate the position. For better or for worse, I think black just has to do this. Otherwise, this bishop it's attacked. This pawn is potentially dropping. It's just a tremendous position. So d4, yeah, I mean, particularly in rapid play, you've just got to sow some confusion. So that was taken. And Pragg took the bishop here. In fact, the machines prefer rook takes, but I suspect that Pragg saw this move bishop e5 and thought, "Whoa, this is just way too complicated." And yeah, I think if you're a machine, then you can play like this with white. But you've got to find this queen sack, and I mean, frankly, this doesn't look very clear at all. Although the machines think that black is actually doing quite well here. Excuse me, that white is actually doing quite well, but 3 minor pieces against the queen, and the king looking a bit loose. The rook the other end of the board. I wouldn't touch that with white, basically. Queen takes bishop played instead. I think a much more practical move. Carlsen played knight f5, hitting the queen, and then he hit the queen again. The queen came back to h5. I think that's necessary. He's got to be careful because this knight is flying in. This is typical Magnus. He wants the initiative. And now I think Pragg played what for me is just a very natural move. He sacrificed a second exchange. And this makes sense of white's pieces. Rook takes and knight takes. So this knight has broken through, hits the rook. But it's just a complete mess now. Rook g8. Obviously the rook was attacked. Bishop d3. So that blocks the d file, very important. Knight d5, the knight spins back, getting rid of this one, and trying to open up here and maybe here as well. Knight takes d5, and here Magnus kind of rushes it. He exchanges queens. Rook takes d5, I think, would have been very tricky for white, actually. I mean, according to the machines, white is still okay here. But when this is attacked, there's potential to check here. And, sometimes this can be played very tricky, actually. But Magnus played this very quickly, forcing an exchange of queens. And now, again, we've just got a really messy position on the board. Bishop and knight against 2 rooks. But white has all these pawns. King e2, excellent move. King needs to come into the game. Here Carlsen should just bring the king across. And it's about level. So when the knight retreats, then black can sack back in exchange, and that should be equal. In fact, well, something rather similar happens in the game, actually. But after king e2, rook takes pawn check, and suddenly this is fantastic for white. Here Pragg played king g3. King e4 is just wonderful for white. The king steps forward. That means the pawns can advance, backed up by the minor pieces. I mean, this is such a solid group of pieces. Everything is protected, and this is a nightmare position for the rooks. Rooks need targets. But here, what can you attack here? Even if you sack back an exchange, then those 2 pawns are just, they're going to advance. When they've got the support of the king, the minor pieces, this is a horrible position for black to play. It must be winning for white. But Pragg played king g3. The knight came back to g5. He took that pawn on h7. Now, if he can bring that knight back to safety and coordinate, then surely white is winning this position. But after this, here is the problem. Well, Pragg played knight f6 check. I guess he could still try knight g5. The computers by this stage aren't too impressed. They think that black is okay. But after knight f6, well, that's definitely okay for black. Carlsen, I'm sure with great relief, sacked back one of the exchanges and collected that pawn on f6. The position has finally settled. It's rook against bishop and 2 pawns. This is a well-known kind of position, and basically this is not enough for white to win. Yeah, I mean, black has to do a little bit of defending, but it's really not too difficult. Carlsen ensures that rook comes across, preventing white's king from getting across to these pawns, and there's actually not a lot going on in this position. And they played it out, of course. Both sides a little bit short on time, but nothing too serious. And the game drifted towards a draw. That king coming back to stop the pawn. There's not a lot that either side can do here. And now that the king is far away from this pawn, Carlsen understands that, of course, he can transpose into a king and pawn endgame, and this is completely drawn. They went round in circles a couple of times, and finally Pragg decided to liquidate and then just give away the a-pawn. Immediately after the game, so that's obviously a draw. Immediately after the game, Magnus applauded Pragg. He gave a little hand clap and gave a thumbs up as well. On another day, I have to say this might appear generous. I guess it was generous to Pragg. But in light of his protest against Niemann, even this sort of act of generosity towards Pragg appeared rather pointed to me. You know, Carlsen is saying, well, you know, some kids are better than others. Some kids behave, some don't. Afraid I've just got to put it that starkly. You know, I'm really disappointed to see the way that Carlsen behaved with this strange resignation protest. We need some evidence from Carlsen. We need explanation, and until that point, I'm feeling really sorry for Hans Niemann. Anyway, the tournament continues. Quick look at the standings. In the lead, after 8 rounds, we have Arjun Erigaisi, and he has 17 points. Praggnanandhaa has 15, as does Carlsen. Then we have Ivanchuk, Niemann, and Duda on 13 points. If you want to follow the action, do check out Chess 24. They start at 1800 hours Central European time. Thanks for watching.